Hi, welcome to this episode of The Strange Past, where I research something from our history that I think is interesting and try to tell you all about it.
In 1857, Captain William Rufus Rogers Stowell of the Utah-based Nauvoo Legion was captured by the U.S. Army. He was then questioned by Army General Albert Sidney Johnston. The conversation between these two men serves as a window into an interesting part of America's forgotten history. Johnston said, "Where do you live?" Captain Stowell said, "In Ogden City, Utah." Johnston said, "What is your business out here?" Stowell said, "To repel a mob, sir." Johnston asked, "What are your reasons for supposing us to be a mob?" Stowell said, "I have known the Latter-day Saints to be harassed by mobs from my first acquaintance with them. While to be consistent, I maintain they are a peaceable and industrious people. It had been reported to us that there was an army coming from the States under the name of government troops without any legal causes. Hence, we regard it as a vile mob." This odd exchange between two men who both believed that they were protecting their people and that they were in alignment with the U.S. Constitution is a window into a strange incident today known as the Utah War, the Utah Expedition, or the Mormon War. Part of our strange past that involved Mormons, polygamy, a future Confederate general, and a lot of misunderstandings. If you're not doing it already, please like, subscribe, follow, whatever you need to do to get more of our content, and let's get started. In 1857, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, sometimes called Mormons, or sometimes LDS people, or just LDS, arrived in what is now Utah in the Great Salt Lake Valley and began to construct what grew to become Salt Lake City. A decade later, President James Buchanan sent Alfred Cummings to de-seat Mormon leader Brigham Young as the territorial governor of the Utah Territory. Why Buchanan sent the replacement isn't 100% clear. Even though Young had been appointed as governor of the territory in 1850 by then-President Millard Fillmore, one major concern was that Young was running a theodemocracy in which Mormons were more likely to adhere to church laws and rules than those of the Constitution, even though many of the church's laws and rules were well within line of the U.S. Constitution. The one major issue that many people were upset about was that of polygamy. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints no longer practices polygamy and banned it in 1890. However, at the time that it was still practiced, many people were very offended by it, and some people even politicized it, seeing it as something that should be stamped out along with slavery. Regardless, just in case there was any opposition to Alfred Cummings arriving in the Utah Territory and taking over as territorial governor, President Buchanan sent 2,500 federal troops to accompany him to Salt Lake City. Apparently, Buchanan never informed Young of the change, leaving him to learn of it through press reports and word of mouth. Facing 2,500 armed men whose mission wasn't completely clear, Brigham Young soon ordered Mormons to prepare to evacuate the Utah Territory as they got word of the troops approaching them in the summer of 1857. LDS missionaries were called home, and LDS settlers as far as San Bernardino, California, were called back to the Salt Lake Valley. To understand the Mormon response to federal troops coming into Utah, you have to know more about their history. From Illinois to Missouri and other points east, Mormons had faced discrimination and outright violence since their beginning in 1830. Some of them were murdered and assaulted, others more often experienced the theft and burning of their homes and property at the hands of anti-Mormon mobs. Even government officials such as Daniel Ashby of the Missouri State Legislature and Thomas Bryan, clerk of Livingston County, Missouri, participated in an unauthorized militia in 1838 that killed 17 Mormon settlers at Haun's Mill, Missouri. The dead included several children, one as young as 7 years old. That same year, Lilburn Boggs, governor of Missouri, made it legal to kill Mormons by Executive Order 44, stating the Mormons must be treated as enemies and must be exterminated or driven from the state if necessary. While ordering his people to prepare to evacuate Salt Lake City in the summer of 1857, Brigham Young also prepared to fight. In August, he reactivated the Nauvoo Legion, a Mormon militia originally formed in Nauvoo, Illinois, used to help protect Mormons from mob violence. Now in Utah, the veteran legionnaires and new recruits were told by Brigham Young to hold themselves in readiness to march at a moment's notice to repel any and all such invasion. Young sent his legion into eastern Utah and present-day Wyoming. The Legion cavalry burned crops and grass that the army stock needed. They often stampeded military animals, and at Simpsons Hollow in present-day Wyoming, they burned supply trains that the army relied on in the desolate Rockies. Given their loss of horses, the U.S. Army formed what was called a jackass cavalry of mules and exchanged about 30 shots with legionnaires during a raid, but no one was hurt. The Legion had a heavy concentration in the narrow Echo and Weber canyons between Salt Lake and Fort Bridger in present-day Wyoming. Some sources say their numbers were as high as 1,200 to 2,000 men in that area alone. Today, rifle pits can still be found in the canyons where they were used by legionnaires to help stop the Army from entering Salt Lake City. These fortifications forced Colonel Alexander of the U.S. Army to attempt to enter Utah along Bear River, a separate route, but a late October blizzard forced his party to turn back. By November of 1857, General Albert Sidney Johnston had arrived in what is now western Wyoming to take command of the Army, but the Mormons' efforts had hampered them so badly they were forced to spend the winter by the ruins of Fort Bridger. Fort Bridger itself had been burned by Mormon militias as part of their scorched earth policy. It was at these ruins that thousands of U.S. troops were forced to spend the winter in tents at Camp Scott and Ecclesville. They dug basements into their canvas shelters in an attempt to avoid the freezing Wyoming winds. In December, back east in Washington, D.C., U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Thomas L. Kane, who had witnessed the Mormon persecutions in Missouri, approached President Buchanan, offering to help broker a treaty. Buchanan agreed to pardon the Mormons' apparent insurrection if they would submit to government authority. Kane left Washington, crossed Panama by rail, and then sailed to Los Angeles, where Mormons escorted him to Salt Lake City. He arrived there in February of 1858. Kane got Brigham Young to accept the new governor as replacement, but Young insisted he had been willing to do so from the very start. Then, from Salt Lake City, Kane traveled up the narrow canyons to Camp Scott by Fort Bridger, where he met the beleaguered and cold U.S. Army. He had little luck calming General Johnston down, but persuaded Young's replacement, Alfred Cummings, to travel to Salt Lake City without a large military force. Arriving in Salt Lake in April, the replacement got a chance to speak with Young, who treated him very well. Cummings took over as governor of Utah, eventually being seen as a moderate voice who did not agree with the hardline attitudes against Mormons. By the spring of 1858, Young supported the new governor, but he still feared the large military force up in Wyoming. In fact, 3,000 more federal troops had been sent to Camp Scott as the snow started to melt. The Nauvoo Legion also upped its numbers, but by then Young was resigned to leading his people out of Utah if necessary. The Latter-day Saints prepared to burn their homes, crops, and anything the pursuing army might use in their wake. 30,000 Mormon refugees began to head south out of Salt Lake City, though their eventual destination wasn't completely clear. The Utah expedition was very unpopular with many people back east. In February of 1858, Senator Sam Houston of Texas had said, "I depreciate it as an intolerable evil. I am satisfied that the executive, meaning the president, has not had the information he ought to have had on the subject before making such a movement." Senator Sam Cameron of Pennsylvania said he saw the Utah War as a failure of the presidency. By April of 1858, President Buchanan sent a peace commission to Salt Lake City, agreeing to pardon Mormons if they would submit to government authority and allow Johnston's army to enter the Salt Lake Valley, even hinting that they wouldn't keep such a large force there for so long. Young denied that he and his followers were ever in rebellion, but did accept the peace, and by June of 1858, Johnston's army marched into Utah. The soldiers marched through the deserted streets of Salt Lake City where things were ready to be set on fire. Some reported having the eerie feeling of being watched, while General Johnston was heard to say he would give his whole plantation to bombard Salt Lake City for 15 minutes, while Lieutenant Colonel Charles Ferguson Smith, also of the Army, said he would like to see every damn Mormon hung by the neck. The Army camped 50 miles southwest of Salt Lake City at Camp Floyd, and slowly, Utah residents began to return to their homes and farms. Eventually, troops moved closer to Salt Lake and established Fort Douglas. Relations between the U.S. Army and the Mormon settlers remained tense for many years. Many Mormons were glad to see the massive army return to the East Coast, unfortunately to fight in the Civil War in 1861. In conclusion, Brigham Young died in 1877, possibly from a ruptured appendix, having married over 50 women and had many children. Many modern Latter-day Saints can trace their ancestry to him, including his great-great-great-grandson Steve Young, Pro Football Hall of Fame quarterback. You can still tour one of Brigham Young's homes in Salt Lake City, the Beehive House. General Johnston resigned his commission and spent some time in California before serving as a general in the Confederate Army. He was mortally wounded at the Battle of Shiloh in 1862 and is now buried in the Texas State Cemetery. A monument at Shiloh marking his death is open to the public. Thomas L. Kane, the peace broker, served as a general in the Union Army during the Civil War. He was wounded on more than one occasion in combat and fought at Gettysburg. He died of pneumonia in Philadelphia the day after Christmas in 1883. Kane County in Utah was named after the general in gratitude for what he had done for the Mormon people. Nauvoo legionnaire and prisoner of war William Rufus Rogers Stowell was repatriated back to Utah after being held prisoner by the U.S. Army for about half a year. His time as a POW resulted in one unsuccessful escape attempt and what he believed was an attempt to poison him. He died, presumably of old age, in 1901 in Juarez, Mexico, after moving there in 1889. Some of the original structures from Fort Douglas remain on the campus of the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. The Mormons, or Latter-day Saints, continue to grow every year with over 16 million adherents. Its members include former presidential candidate Mitt Romney, singer Gladys Knight, and Stephenie Meyer, who wrote the Twilight series. The infamous Executive Order 44 that legalized the expulsion and killing of Mormons in 1838 was finally rescinded by Missouri's governor in 1976, 7 years after Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, and 200 years after the founding of the United States.
I'd like to thank you for watching the first episode of The Strange Past. I hope that you'll watch more. I think our next episode will be about dueling, and if you have any ideas for shows that you'd like to learn more about, please email me or put it in the comments. Thanks.